The clinking of glasses echoed across the banquet hall, laughter rolling through the air like a wave. Round tables draped in ivory linens filled the space, the chandelier lights bouncing off polished wine glasses. It was supposed to be a celebration, our annual family reunion, but in reality, it felt more like a stage where reputations were paraded and pride was auctioned. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from, and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. Attention everyone, my mother's voice cut through the chatter. Her tone had that sharp edge I'd known my whole life, the one that carried the weight of judgment. I froze mid-bite, fork trembling in my hand. Mom stood at the head of the table, her crimson dress gleaming under the light. She raised her glass of champagne, her lips curling into that familiar, disdainful smile. "This year has been remarkable for our family," she began, her eyes scanning over my cousins, lawyers, doctors, entrepreneurs, all of them basking in her approval. "We have so much to celebrate. Success surrounds us, and it is proof of the strength of this family." The room hummed with agreement, the claps, the nods, the murmurs of pride. My stomach knotted. I knew what was coming. She couldn't resist. But her voice lingered like poison on the air, dragging attention toward me. "There are exceptions?" Every eye turned my way. My cheeks burned hot, my throat tightening. My cousin Scott chuckled under his breath, sipping his wine as if this was routine entertainment. Mom set her glass down with precision, her gaze stabbing into me. "Some of us," she said, the corners of her mouth twitching in mock pity, "have chosen no future. Some of us remain irrelevant." A silence dropped heavy over the room. My heart slammed in my chest, pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. She tilted her head, voice rising just enough to make sure no one missed a word. "She has no career, no contribution, nothing to her name. In fact," her lips pursed, cruel amusement flashing in her eyes. "If you wish to celebrate true accomplishments, I suggest you all ignore her." The words sliced me open. My fork clattered against the plate, the sound sharp in the silence. I felt their eyes on me. Pity, amusement, judgment. A mixture that twisted into a sickening knot in my stomach. I wanted to vanish. Lila, my sister, leaned back in her chair, smirking. "She's not wrong," she whispered loud enough for others to hear. "Some people are just background noise." Laughter rippled, cruel and unrestrained. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay composed. My hands balled into fists under the table. The humiliation was crushing, a heat crawling up my neck, burning through every nerve. I could have screamed. I could have lashed out. But I sat still, silent, my face a mask though my insides shook. Across the table, my cousin Rachel whispered, "Poor thing," to her husband, though the smirk on her face betrayed her words. My mother raised her glass once again, sealing my humiliation with a toast. "To success," she said, her eyes lingering on everyone but me. The clinking returned, louder than before. I didn't raise my glass. My throat was too tight, my body trembling from holding back tears. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the shame, beneath the sting, something hardened. I sat there quietly, watching their smug smiles, their careless laughter, their celebration at my expense. And in that silence, I promised myself, tomorrow will not look like today. They didn't know who I really was. They didn't know the man waiting for me outside that hall. They didn't know the truth I had carried silently, protecting it like a flame. And tomorrow, when the Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of them, every single one of them would stand. I walked out of the banquet hall with my head high, but inside, my chest felt like it was caving in. The humiliation still echoed in my ears, my mother's words, my family's laughter. Every step to the parking lot felt heavy, but then I saw Ethan. He was leaning against his SUV, waiting for me like he always did. Calm, steady, safe. The second his eyes met mine, he knew. Without a word, he opened his arms, and I let myself sink into him. "She did it again," I whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You don't deserve that." "I'm tired of being their target," I said, pulling back. "I'm done staying quiet." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "So tomorrow we stop being quiet." I hesitated. Tomorrow's brunch will be worse. She's inviting people who matter to her. Ethan's voice was steady, almost protective. Then let's show them who you are. If it takes pulling up in the rolls to make them listen, then that's what we'll do. A fire sparked inside me, not revenge, not pride, just the need to stand tall for once in front of the people who had spent years cutting me down. All right, I said softly. Tomorrow, we go true. The morning of the brunch arrived colder than I expected. A sharp wind pressed against the windows, carrying the kind of gray sky that promised an unsettled day. I stood in front of the mirror, palms pressed against the dresser, staring at my reflection. My face looked calm, but my stomach churned. Today wasn't about outfits or appearances. It was about showing up as someone they could no longer erase. Still, I chose carefully. A navy dress that hugged my frame without screaming for attention, a camel coat draped across my shoulders, and black heels that gave me height without stealing comfort. I wanted them to see me, not a costume, not an exaggeration, just me. Ethan arrived right on time. The knock on the door was firm, steady, just like him. When I opened it, he was there in a tailored charcoal suit, hair neatly combed, expression serious but soft when he looked at me. In his hand, he held a travel mug. "Oat milk, 2 sugars," he said, pressing it into my hands. My lips tugged into a faint smile. "You remembered?" "I always do." For a moment, we just stood there, letting silence breathe between us. Then he asked, "Ready?" I exhaled slowly. "As I'll ever be." The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, like the universe was stretching time just to test me. By the time the doors opened to the lobby, my heartbeat was thundering. Outside, parked at the curb, the Rolls-Royce shimmered under the dull sky like a secret the world hadn't earned yet. It didn't scream wealth, it radiated presence. Neighbors stopped mid-stride, some pretending not to stare, others openly gawking. I slipped into the back seat, the leather hugging me in quiet reassurance. When Ethan started the engine, the hum was low and steady, like a heartbeat too calm to be nervous. The drive felt surreal. Buildings blurred past, streetlights flickered, and my phone buzzed endlessly in my purse. I refused to look. I already knew what the messages said: warnings, mockery, reminders to stay in my place. I powered the phone off and pushed it aside. "You don't need them to define you," Ethan said, eyes fixed on the road. "I know," I murmured, "but I need to stop letting them silence me." When we turned onto Maple Ridge, my breath caught. The reunion house loomed ahead, a sprawling stone monument to appearances. The driveway was packed with cars. SUVs lined up like trophies, sedans polished to impress, even a couple of shiny imports parked right up front. But when we pulled in, the purr of the rolls made heads turn instantly. From the wide bay windows, faces appeared, pressing closer to the glass. A ripple spread across the room, like someone had dropped a stone into a still pond. I opened the door slowly, the wind tugging at my coat. My heels clicked against the pavement, each step echoing louder than it should have. Ethan rounded the car and joined me, keeping a respectful half-step behind, his presence like a shield. Through the window, I saw them. My mother frozen mid-conversation, her smile faltering. My sister Lila's glass tilted in her hand as she gawked. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they all turned, whispers sparking across the room. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I wasn't here to beg for a seat. I wasn't here to prove anything. I was here to take back the voice they'd tried so hard to strip away. I turned to Ethan, my voice low but steady. "No rescuing me." He gave me the faintest smile. "I wouldn't dare." Together, we walked toward the front steps, and inside, my entire family waited, about to learn a truth that would silence the room in a way no toast ever could. The doors opened with a creak that shouldn't have been loud, but in the silence that followed our arrival, it sounded like a crack through the air. Conversations had halted, laughter dissolved mid-breath, and the only thing filling the room was the sharp clink of a spoon dropped against porcelain. I stepped inside first, the warmth of the house brushing against my skin, but it didn't soften me. Eyes followed every step I took. Aunts shifted uncomfortably. Cousins whispered to their spouses, and my sister Lila leaned back in her chair with a smirk that was meant to mask her shock, but didn't quite manage it. And then there was my mother. She stood near the fireplace, a champagne glass poised in her hand, but her knuckles had whitened around the stem. Her eyes, always sharp, always searching for weakness, met mine. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw something I had never seen before. Hesitation. Ava, she said, her voice pitched higher than usual. You decided to come after all. I slipped out of my coat and draped it neatly over the arm of a chair, moving with deliberate calm. Of course I came. You invited the family, didn't you? Her lips tightened. Yes, but... Her gaze flicked toward Ethan, who had followed me in, steady and silent, the very picture of composure in his tailored suit. She blinked, then glanced back at me. I wasn't expecting... company, Lila snorted, swirling the wine in her glass. She always needs someone to hold her hand. I turned my head toward her slowly, locking eyes with the sister who had never missed a chance to cut me down. No, Lila, I don't need anyone to hold my hand, but I do choose who stands beside me. There's a difference. A hush swept over the room, broken only by the faint crackle of the fireplace. My Uncle Scott cleared his throat, his attempt at levity sounding forced. Well, Ava, you've made an entrance. That car outside. Rolls-Royce, isn't it? His wife elbowed him, whispering, Scott! But he grinned wider, smug as always. Yes, it is, Ethan answered before I could. His tone was calm, almost casual, but the room reacted like someone had dropped a bomb. Several cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats, a few raising eyebrows. My mother's eyes narrowed, flickering between us. Why would you be driving that? Her words came carefully, each one clipped like she was trying not to choke on them. Ethan glanced at me, giving me the chance to decide whether we said it outright. But I held the silence. I wanted them to lean forward, to feel the weight of their own curiosity pressing on them like a stone. Rachel, my cousin, broke first. Wait, she said, eyes darting. Are you saying, what, he owns that? Owns it? Scott laughed, shaking his head. Don't be ridiculous. People lease things all the time. Appearances are easy. He looked at me, smug satisfaction on his face. Isn't that right, Ava? Appearances are all you've ever... Had the words should have cut deep, the way they always had before. But today they bounced off me. For the first time, I realized how small his opinion truly was. I stepped closer to the table, my voice calm but loud enough for every ear in the room. For years, you've all defined me by what you think I lack. No job you approved of, no lifestyle that impressed you, no worth in your eyes. And I stayed quiet. I let you tell your story about me while I disappeared into the background. I paused, my gaze sweeping across every familiar face, the smirks, the judgment, the pity, all of it. My voice steadied, stronger now. But here's the truth. I don't need your approval. I never did. And I am not the invisible girl you decided I was. The silence that followed was so deep, I could hear the faint tick of the clock on the mantel. Lila leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, her smirk faltering. You think showing up in some fancy car changes everything? No, I said firmly. I think living my life with dignity changes everything. The car is just what made you look up long enough to notice me. Gasps rippled across the room. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. Scott opened his mouth but shut it again, words failing him for once. And my mother, her face was stone. But I saw the crack in her expression, the disbelief she couldn't quite hide. Enough, she said suddenly, her voice rising. This isn't the place for speeches. You're embarrassing yourself. I took a step toward her, the weight of the entire room behind me. No, Mother. I embarrassed myself for years by staying quiet. Today, I'm simply telling the truth. The room froze. Chairs creaked as people shifted, unsure of where to look, what to say, how to process the shift in power that had just happened. Behind me, Ethan placed a steady hand on the back of my chair, not guiding me, not shielding me, simply standing with me. His quiet presence said more than any words could. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl they mocked or ignored. I was the one they had to face. And tomorrow, none of them would ever forget it. The silence after my words wasn't ordinary silence. It was heavy, thick enough to suffocate the room. For the first time in years, their eyes weren't dismissing me, weren't laughing at me. They were searching, calculating, wondering what they had missed. My mother's glass trembled slightly in her hand. She set it down with care, but the sound of the crystal tapping against the marble counter was louder than anything else. You think, she said slowly, her voice coated in venom, that walking in here with a man and a car makes you someone? No, I said clearly. I think the years I spent building my life, while you pretended I had nothing, make me someone. The words landed hard. A cousin at the far end coughed awkwardly. An aunt shifted her chair. Lila crossed her arms, smirk twitching into something uglier. You're bluffing, she said. You always wanted us to think you were doing better than you were. You used to borrow money from me for gas, Ava. Don't act like you've turned into something overnight. I turned to her, and for the first time, I didn't feel heat rush to my cheeks or shame crawl into my chest. Instead, I felt steady. You're right, Lila, I said softly. I did borrow money for gas once. I struggled. I failed. I started from nothing. But do you know what makes me different from you? Her smirk faltered. What? I didn't stay small. Gasps spread across the table like a current of electricity. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, even, but carrying across the stunned air. You're looking at someone who's built more resilience than any of you could ever measure. She didn't just survive. You underestimated her. That's your mistake. My Uncle Scott leaned forward, scowling. What exactly are you saying here? What kind of game is this? Who are you? Ethan's eyes didn't leave mine as he answered, his words chosen with precision. Her husband, and a man who's never needed this family's approval. The impact of that statement reverberated through the room. A collective intake of breath swept over my relatives. Someone whispered, husband? As if it were a scandal, as if the word itself shattered their carefully crafted image of me. My mother's eyes widened, her composure cracking for just a moment. Married? She hissed. You got married without telling us? Yes, I said firmly, because I knew what you'd do. You would have mocked, twisted, belittled it, just like everything else I've ever done. So I kept my life separate, away from this poison, away from the noise. The room reeled. My mother's hand hovered in the air like she wanted to reach for something, anything to steady herself. Lila's smirk had evaporated entirely. Her face was pale, her glass forgotten on the table. Then Ethan stepped slightly forward, his presence filling the silence. For years, you've told Ava she had no future, that she was nothing, that she'd always be the background in her own story. His voice didn't rise, but it had weight, measured, undeniable. But here's the truth. Ava is the strongest person in this room. She is the reason I'm standing where I am today. She is my partner, my equal, and the woman who has built a life alongside me that none of you even realize exists. I swallowed, my throat thick with emotion. The words I had wanted to hear my whole life, acknowledgement, recognition, love spoken openly, were now said in the very room where I had once been silenced. My mother tried one last time, her voice sharp but strained. So what? You think because he has money, because he drives that car, that you've suddenly elevated yourself? That makes you proud? No, I said, stepping closer to her, my voice steady but burning. What makes me proud is that despite all the years you told me I was nothing, despite all the times you excluded me, mocked me, humiliated me, I built a life worth living, a life you can't touch, can't control, and can't define. My words echoed, and this time, no one laughed. No one dared. Ethan reached for my hand, not to shield me, but to stand with me. Together, we turned toward the door. The room was frozen. Cousins speechless, aunts stunned, my sister shaking with silent anger, my mother gripping the table like it was the only thing holding her upright. As we walked out, heels clicking on marble, the only sound behind us was the scraping of chairs. One by one, they all stood. Not out of respect, not out of choice, but because for the first time, they had to. The Rolls-Royce door closed with a soft thud, shutting them out. As the car pulled away, the house grew smaller in the rear window, a monument to years of silence I no longer owed them. I leaned back against the seat, my hand still in Ethan's. My voice was quiet but certain. They'll never look at me the same again. Ethan squeezed my hand, his lips curving into the faintest smile. Good. Because you were never who they thought you were. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The string lights above the empty reception hall flickered like they were mocking me. The DJ cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly behind his booth as he looked around at rows of untouched chairs and perfectly plated meals no one came to eat. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from, and from which city. you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I stood there in my white dress, clutching my bouquet so tightly the stems bent under my fingers. My mascara was already smudging, but I didn't bother to wipe it away. What was the point? Nobody's coming? Whispered Amanda, my best friend, and the only person who showed up. Her voice carried the guilt of someone who couldn't fix what was broken. I forced a laugh, though it cracked in the middle. They're at Claire's engagement party. My mom said she couldn't be in two places at once. Guess she made her choice. The words sliced deeper than I wanted to admit. Claire, my younger sister, the golden one. She announced her engagement a week before my wedding date. My parents didn't ask me to move the ceremony. They simply told me they had more important things to attend to. I swallowed hard, lifting my chin, pretending like it didn't shatter me. But the truth? The silence of that room was louder than any rejection I'd ever faced. The DJ lowered the volume on the background music and mumbled, "Should I pack up?" "Yeah," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Go ahead." Amanda reached for my hand. "You don't deserve this, Emily. Not you." I shook my head. "Let's just leave." But as I stepped toward the exit, heels clicking against the marble floor, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and a man in a dark suit stood behind me. His face was unfamiliar. Sharp jaw, gray streaks in his hair, piercing eyes that carried something unshakable. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself. He just held out a box, small, black, with a silver clasp. "This is for you," he said, his tone low but firm, as if rehearsed. I hesitated. "From who?" "You'll find out," he answered, handing it over before walking past me, disappearing out the glass doors like a ghost. Amanda's eyes widened. What the hell was that? My fingers trembled as I opened the box right there in the middle of the lobby. Inside was a thick envelope stuffed with documents, and a single key with a tag that read one word: mine. I pulled out the papers, scanning them with wide eyes. Property deeds, bank account information, shares of a company I didn't even recognize, all transferred to my name. Amanda gasped, "Emily, this says you own everything. Who would—" But before she could finish, my phone buzzed violently in my hand. 37 missed calls, all from Mom. And then one text popped up on my screen. "Emily, where are you? Something's wrong with Claire. We need you right now." I froze, my chest tightened. After abandoning me on my wedding day, now they needed me? Amanda grabbed my arm. "Don't you dare go running back to them. Not after this." But my heart was pounding, torn between rage and curiosity. I looked at the key again, then at the documents in my hand. For the first time in my life, the balance of power had shifted, and they didn't even know it yet. I exhaled shakily and whispered, "They're about to find out who I really am." The hotel lobby buzzed with voices and clinking glasses as I stepped out of the car. My dress still trailed behind me like a ghost of the ceremony nobody had cared to attend. Amanda walked at my side, clutching the black box to her chest. We didn't wait for permission. We pushed through the revolving doors into the Monarch Hotel. The 20-floor ballroom glimmered with chandeliers, laughter, and music. People turned, startled, as I entered in my wedding gown. Their smiles faltered. My mother hurried toward me, her face pale. "Emily, thank God you're here." She grabbed my arm like I was a lifeline. I pulled away. "You skipped my wedding. Why call me now?" She swallowed hard. "Claire, there's a problem with her engagement contract. With the finances, they need your signature." "Of course," I said flatly. "You forget me until you need me." Dad appeared behind her, folder in hand. "Just sign this. It's routine." Amanda stepped closer. "Show us first." I opened the folder. Buried inside the neat legal language were hidden traps, power of attorney clauses, credit guarantees, obligations tied to my name. They wanted me to carry their debts. I snapped the folder shut. "No." A hush swept the room. Claire's fiancé shifted uncomfortably, his mother glaring at me like I'd ruined her evening. My sister's eyes filled with tears. "Emily, please," she whispered. "If you don't help, everything could collapse." I looked her straight in the eye. "It already has." And then, as if on cue, the same gray-haired man who had handed me the box earlier appeared at the far end of the ballroom. His calm steps cut through the music. He gave me the smallest nod. Everyone else stared in confusion, but I understood. The balance had changed. I turned back to my parents. You taught me I wasn't worth showing up for. Tonight, I finally believe you. So don't ask me to save what you built on lies. I walked out, Amanda by my side, the box clutched tighter than ever. For the first time, it felt like I was walking toward something instead of away. The night air hit colder than I expected as we stepped outside the Monarch. My heels clicked against the pavement, every sound echoing louder than the muffled music still bleeding from inside. Amanda squeezed my arm. You don't realize it yet, Em, she said, but you just turned the tables on them. For the first time, they're scared of you. I wanted to believe her, but my chest was still a battlefield of anger and ache. My family had humiliated me, first abandoning my wedding, now begging only when their image was threatened. And still, some broken part of me longed for their approval. But then my hand brushed against the box Amanda held, and I remembered the man's words. Delivery confirmed. Before I could speak, the hum of an engine pulled up to the curb. A sleek black sedan rolled to a stop, and the rear window slid down. The same gray-haired man sat inside, his voice calm and measured. Ms. Kerr, we don't have much time. I suggest you come with me. Amanda stiffened. Why should she trust you? He met her stare with a steady gaze. Because she already has the key, and because her family is about to make a very desperate move. I exhaled slowly and climbed in. Amanda followed reluctantly. The door shut, sealing us into silence broken only by the engine's smooth growl. Where are we going? I asked. South Ashland, he replied. The warehouse your benefactor left for you. Tonight you'll see why. I clutched the key in my hand, the one stamped mine, the metal cold against my skin. Who is this benefactor? He didn't answer immediately. His reflection in the tinted window looked almost ghostly. You'll know soon, but first, you need to understand what you've inherited and why your family fears it. Amanda crossed her arms. Her family treats her like dirt. Why would they fear her? The man allowed himself a faint, almost grim smile. Because power doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it comes in silence, like tonight. The car slowed near a row of industrial buildings. Most were dark, abandoned shells, but one stood lit at the corners, a low hum of electricity in the air. The driver stopped. This is it, the man said. Your property, your beginning. I stepped out, gravel crunching beneath my heels. My dress dragged through dirt, the once pristine fabric now streaked with gray. Somehow it felt right. The steel door loomed tall. My fingers trembled as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a sharp click, and the door groaned open. Inside was not dust and emptiness as I expected. The lights flickered to life automatically, revealing rows of shelves, filing cabinets, and a polished desk at the far end. A single folder sat waiting, my name typed neatly on the cover. I walked forward, my footsteps echoing in the vast space. I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, and bank ledgers that made my stomach tighten. Every page told a story, my family's loans, their defaults, their hidden debts tied to businesses they paraded as successful. And across each page was one name stamped in bold red letters. Mine Holdings, LLC. Amanda gasped. Emily, your family's empire. It isn't theirs. It's yours. The man nodded. The company owns the properties, the accounts, the contracts. And as of this morning, by condition of your marriage, you are the sole shareholder. I staggered back, clutching the desk. You're telling me everything they built, all their pride, all their wealth, was borrowed, he finished, and now it belongs to you. The weight of it hit me like a wave. The box, the key, the letter, it wasn't just a gift, it was a weapon. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten one. I was the storm they never saw coming. I looked at Amanda. My voice shook but carried steel underneath. Tomorrow, they'll know what it feels like to be left with nothing. The folder trembled in my hands as I flipped page after page, each document peeling back layers of truth I'd never been allowed to see. My family's empire wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards, propped up by silent loans and quiet acquisitions, all funneled through the company name that now stared back at me in bold letters, MINE Holdings. Amanda leaned over my shoulder, her eyes wide. Emily, They're finished. If you wanted, you could walk into that ballroom tomorrow morning and end every illusion they've been feeding the world. I pressed my palm against the desk, steadying myself. But why me? Who gave me this? The gray-haired man, James, stood with his hands clasped loosely behind his back, posture rigid like he'd trained for moments exactly like this. Your benefactor didn't choose randomly. You were always the intended heir, not your sister, not your parents, you. My throat tightened. Heir? Yes, James said, because you were the only one who knew how to survive without their wealth, the only one who could be trusted not to squander it. Amanda scoffed. And they treated her like garbage, like she was disposable. Exactly, James replied evenly. They underestimated her, which makes what comes next inevitable. The warehouse hummed with silence, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above us. I stared at the ledger again, heart pounding as the reality sank in. Every building, every investment, every property my family flaunted at galas and magazine interviews was now legally under my control. I could already hear the whispers, the gasps, the outrage when they discovered. For years, they called me the failure, the burden. Now, without knowing it, they had been living in my shadow all along. But part of me wasn't satisfied with just the thought of revenge. The old wound in me, the little girl who begged for her parents' approval, who was shoved to the back seat while her sister basked in praise, ached for something more. Closure, a reckoning. I closed the folder and straightened my back. Tomorrow morning, I'm going back to them, not as their forgotten daughter, not as the one they mocked and left behind, but as the one holding the strings. Amanda smiled, fiercely. Now that's the Emily I've been waiting to meet. James stepped forward, his tone calm but pointed. If you want to confront them, be prepared. They will deny. They will manipulate. They will beg. But once you show them proof, their desperation will turn dangerous. Power does not change people. It reveals them. A chill ran down my spine. Then let them reveal themselves, I said coldly. The next morning, sunlight cut through the blinds of Amanda's apartment where I'd stayed the night. My dress hung on the back of a chair, the fabric wrinkled, stained, no longer glowing white but gray with the weight of what had happened. It didn't feel like a symbol of love anymore. It felt like armor, tarnished but strong. Amanda handed me a cup of coffee. Ready? I sipped, my hands steady now. More than ever. We arrived at my parents' estate mid-morning. Their mansion sat smugly on its hill, the kind of home designed to intimidate. But today, as I stepped out of the car with the black box in my arms, it no longer scared me. A servant opened the door, surprise flickering in his eyes at my presence. Word traveled fast in this house. I was sure my mother already knew I was here. Sure enough, she appeared at the top of the staircase, pearls around her neck, her expression brittle. Emily, you shouldn't have come back after last night. Good morning to you too, I said, walking inside without permission. Amanda followed close, clutching a second folder of copies James had given us, our proof. My father emerged from his study, his jaw tight. You embarrassed us yesterday. You humiliated Claire in front of her fiancé's family. Do you realize what you've done? I laughed, the sound sharper than glass. You mean telling the truth? Refusing to sign away my life? That's humiliation to you? Claire came rushing down the stairs, her silver engagement ring flashing under the chandelier light. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was sharp. Why are you here, Emily? Haven't you ruined enough already? I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. I didn't ruin anything. You all did that yourselves. But I came back to finish it. Amanda stepped forward and dropped the folder onto the dining table with a dramatic thud. The papers spilled out, contracts, ledgers, deeds, transfers. My parents froze, their eyes darting across the documents. What is this? My mother whispered. Proof, I said softly. Proof that your fortune, your homes, your investments, they were never truly yours. Every loan, every credit line, every asset was tied back to one company, Mine Holdings. My father paled but tried to maintain his authority. That's absurd. That's false, I cut in, pulling the deed from the top of the pile. Because according to these documents, every property listed under your name has already been transferred. And guess whose name replaced yours? I held up the deed and let the silence linger. Mine, I said firmly. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. My mother stumbled back into a chair, clutching the edge as though the ground had dropped beneath her. My father's face turned red. Impossible. This must be forged. Do you think you can walk in here with a stack of papers and scare us? You've always been weak, Emily. Always beneath us. That hasn't changed. But even as he spoke, his voice shook. He knew. Deep down, he knew. Amanda leaned against the table, arms crossed. Funny, isn't it? The weak one now owns every piece of your empire. I stepped closer to my parents, lowering my voice so they had no choice but to hear every word. Yesterday, you left me standing alone in a wedding hall, humiliated, abandoned. Today I'm standing in your house with the power to take it from you with one phone call. Tell me again, who's beneath who? The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Claire finally broke it, her voice desperate. Emily, please, don't do this. I didn't know. I turned to her, my expression cold. You knew enough to laugh at me, to let Mom and Dad treat me like I was nothing. You knew enough to stay silent. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't change the truth, I cut in. Everything you thought you had now belongs to me. I dropped the box onto the table, the sound echoing through the hall like a gavel striking down a verdict. For the first time in my life, they weren't looking at me like I was invisible. They were looking at me like I was the storm about to swallow them whole, and I intended to. The silence after I dropped the box was thick enough to choke on. My mother's hand shook as she reached for one of the documents, her pearl bracelet clinking against the wood of the table. Her eyes darted across the words, pupils shrinking, lips parting as the reality hit her. This isn't possible, she whispered. Everything here, this company, this can't be real. It's real, I said, my voice low, deliberate. You wanted me invisible. You wanted me weak. But you didn't notice someone else was watching. Someone who chose me instead of you. Last night, you abandoned me at my own wedding. This morning, I inherited everything you built on lies. My father's fist slammed down on the table. No! You're nothing but a pawn. Someone is using you to get to us. His voice cracked, rage bleeding into panic. I stepped closer, locking eyes with him. If I'm just a pawn, why are you shaking? Amanda smirked at my side, arms folded. Because pawns don't hold the deeds to mansions, companies, and bank accounts. Queens do. Claire gasped, tears streaking her mascara. She reached out to me like a child begging for mercy. Emily, please, don't take everything. Just let us keep the house. Let me keep my engagement. I swear, I didn't know. I cut her off with a sharp laugh. Didn't know. Claire, you knew every time you smiled while Mom called me a failure. You knew when you stayed silent while they mocked me. You knew when you stood in that ballroom last night, celebrating while I was left alone in a wedding dress. Don't you dare say you didn't know. Her hand dropped like dead weight. Mom tried again, her voice trembling but still reaching for control. Emily, we're family. Families fight. They betray. But they always forgive. We can fix this. We can share. The word share made my blood boil. I leaned forward across the table until she flinched back. You never shared anything with me. Not love, not respect. Not even a seat at your precious table. Why would I share now? Dad tried to recover his authority, but his voice came out brittle. You wouldn't survive one day without us. That company, those accounts, you have no idea how to manage them. I straightened, lifting my chin. Then I'll learn, just like I learned how to survive without your money, without your help, without your approval. The difference is, now I don't need you, but you... I jabbed my finger toward him, toward all of them. You need me. Their faces told the truth. Fear, not of losing me, but of losing everything they thought was untouchable. Amanda pulled out another envelope from her bag and slid it across the table. In case you think this is some bluff, here are certified copies, notarized, irrefutable. My mother stared at the papers like they were knives. My father's knuckles went white, gripping the edge of the table. Claire crumpled onto the couch, sobbing quietly into her hands. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in this house. I felt enormous. I turned to leave. Emily, my mother cried out. If you walk out that door, you'll regret it. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the doorframe. I looked back at them. This family that had raised me in shadows, discarded me like an afterthought, and then begged when their empire cracked. No, I said calmly. The only regret I have is wasting years waiting for you to love me. The words hung in the air like thunder. Amanda opened the door, and sunlight spilled across the polished marble floor, bright and unforgiving. I stepped through, heels clicking, heart steady, my future finally mine. Behind me, I heard my father's voice break into a guttural roar, my mother's sobs mixing with Claire's gasps. But I didn't turn back, not once. Outside, the gray-haired man, James, stood by the car, holding the door open. He bowed his head slightly as I approached. "Ms. Kerr," he said, "it begins today." I slid into the car, the black box still clutched tight in my arms. Amanda followed, her smile fierce, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen before, pride. As the engine rumbled to life and the estate grew smaller in the rearview mirror, I exhaled, my voice, barely above a whisper, but filled with power I never thought I'd hold. They called me nothing. Today I became everything. The car pulled away, carrying me not just from a house, but from a lifetime of chains. And for the first time, the horizon didn't scare me. It waited for me.